live training with our friend Yulia Blinova. How are you, Yulia? Welcome, welcome.
All is well, thank you very much. Hungry, but you know that's a problem that can be resolved.
Yes, yes. I think we're all hungry to learn from you today, because one of the most interesting topics that sellers want to know about is how to source from Japan, how to get made in Japan products. So today we're gonna walk you through exactly that in our live training. You'll learn the advantages of sourcing made in Japan products, the product types, the product categories that can be sourced from Japan, where to get started to find some of these Japanese suppliers. And also, I know a lot of people RSVP. We had almost 100 people that RSVP for this webinar. So some people will not be able to join live. They'll join the replay, but we also have some pre-submitted questions. I know a lot of you guys had questions about communicating with Japanese suppliers, as well as advantages, pros and cons versus from China. So we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can. And for the people that are joining us live, we'll have a chance for you guys to submit questions as well. So if you do have any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat during the presentation. Yulia has very generously offered to answer any questions as we go through. So let's keep this interactive. Meanwhile, because we are live, if you can type your name and where you are joining us from, just so we know, that would be great. So for those of you guys meeting Yulia for the first time, I'd like to introduce her. So Yulia Blinova is the co-founder of 2 Amazon brands. She has 18 years of experience in global product sourcing, supply chain logistics, import-export, and e-commerce fields. She's also, prior to founding Zignify, she was a former managing director of Russia for a German startup, FlixBus, and she's also consulted for a number of large companies such as BCG, Alibaba, Jupe, and other organizations with sourcing and supply chain. And she also is a self-proclaimed motorcycle chick, traveler, and partner to her better half, Sebastian, who is also co-founder at Zignify. And Yulia was one of our speakers at our 7-Figure Seller Japan Mastermind recently in Okinawa, and she dropped a ton of knowledge there as well. So welcome, Yulia. And before we get started, can you share with us who is this training for today and why is it so important?
Hi. Well, you made me sound old, and I'm gonna make me sound even older because I've been in a supply chain sourcing business for actually 19 years by now, not 18. Look, I'm a seller myself. We sell mostly in Europe, but we purchase our products from around the globe. Making sure that you have all your bases covered when it comes to sourcing from different countries is literally the basics that you should be looking at right now, because you need to diversify your supply chain. Whether you're selling in Japan or you want to use Japan as a platform for sourcing, you need to understand the country before you actually dive into it. Everybody looks at China, everybody looks at Vietnam, even Malaysia by now, but a lot of people avoid Japan because they're afraid of, oh, but everything's so expensive. How am I gonna do this? So of course there are difficulties and barriers to entry, but that is the point. I want to show what are the goodies that you can get out of Japan, how can you get those things out of Japan, and of course what are the barriers to entry. Because look, any Amazon business, like let's say 10 years ago, there were all of those courses on, they still are on YouTube, where you, buy for $2, sell for 20, low barrier to entry, no certification, buy it as cheap as possible, as easy as possible, no customization, and all of those things. Now everything is actually going the opposite direction. Most of our customers, they're actually requesting a higher barrier to entry, so it will be a lot harder for their competition to actually, launch in the market. So to answer your question, why is it important? Well, it's important to learn new strategies for your business, right? To diversify, to make sure you stay on top, and your business doesn't die. As simple as that.
Definitely. Yeah, I think you raised a really good, important point as well. sourcing from Japan is something that not many sellers know how to do. And also it's a great way to differentiate your product. And from the competition side, obviously sourcing from China, oftentimes the factory will compete directly with you. And a lot of people are looking at the same product on Alibaba. So in Japan, it's a lot less prone to do that because Japan is not as well utilized as China. And one other thing, one of the biggest concerns about Japan is everything's super expensive and stuff like that. But if you guys have been paying attention to the news recently, the Japanese yen hit a 35-year historic low against the US dollar. So you're seeing a ton of tourists coming in, and like the stuff in Japan actually feels like it's on sale. It's like a 20% or even 30% cheaper than just a few years ago. So you might be pleasantly surprised. Not to say everything is cheaper than China, but it might not be as expensive as you think. All right, so great points, Yulia. Without further ado, would you like to go ahead and start the presentation, Yulia, and share your screen, please?
Sure. And for those of you who might think that I look a little bit sleepy, that might actually be the case because I'm located in Germany and it's 3 o'clock in the morning for me. I am an early riser at around 5 or 5:30. So, but 3, like I need to go to the airport, which I'm only doing next week. I'm coming back. I just got back from where was I was in China. I was in Japan, Hong Kong, Japan, China, Thailand in the last months. I got back on Sunday and I'm flying out again on Tuesday. Singapore and China again. So if anybody is around Singapore or China in the next 2 weeks, would be happy to meet for an alcohol-free beer or a tea or a dinner. All right. So to Japan or not to Japan, haha, funny. For those of you interested in Shakespeare, Gary already told a little bit about me. Yes, we have our 2 brands, Zignify, the sourcing. I've been in sourcing for the last 19 years, and currently Zignify as a team, we're 60 plus women on the team, and Sebastian, who is my partner. So we actually do sourcing from across the globe, including Japan. When we started doing sourcing from across the globe, including Japan, one of the first things we immediately realized is, of course, how deep you need to go into the culture in order to make sure that you're negotiating in the right way. So the major point is not even finding the manufacturers. You can always find the manufacturers somehow, but it's the next step of actually knowing how to communicate with the manufacturer. So just quickly, one of our customers is actually Amazon. So we do sourcing directly for Amazon for their brands, not for all of them, but for some. We work with people who are just starting out in the industry and are trying to launch their own brands. Maybe you have a full-time job and you're trying to do this, or huge multinational corporations. For me, it doesn't matter. I like to help the little guy, to be open and honest. So because I don't have so much time, I'm going to dive directly into it and let's discuss Japan. So advantages and opportunities actually of sourcing from Japan. Most of you will know, like I am Russian, but I live in Germany, and every time I'm talking to someone, it's like, oh, German quality products. Yes, I would like to sell this. Because you got that stamp, made in Germany. You got exactly the same thing when it comes to Japan. One of my favorite movies of all times is actually Back to the Future. Back to the Future 1, Back to the Future 2, and Back to the Future 3. In the third version of it, if any of you watch the movie, they're actually discussing a microchip that comes from Japan. And the setting is in the 50s in US. And they're like, Japan? I'm like, oh my God, what is that? And the other guy says, well, yes, Japanese, they make the best quality. And to be open and honest, up to this day, yes, Japan and quality, they stand hand in hand. So if you would like to sell products, or you're already selling products that are in a little bit of a higher category, higher pricing category, Japan can be a wonderful country for you because yes, you can get an outstanding quality. Do you need to pay a price for it? Absolutely. But sometimes it's not as high as a lot of people think it is. So quality, functionality, reliability, and testing requirements. So those are kind of top things that come out of Japan. If you've ever been to Japan, you can go to any store and you can see some gadgets that you couldn't even dream of. And they look as this, like they have what we call Nordic design, so very plain, very simple, but the functionality is insane. So this is something you can use for your research. Even if you're not going to Japan personally, you can use a lot of online resources to take a look what is out there. And I will share some of them later. So Japanese, they might be working a little bit slower, but that is exactly the point of being as reliable as possible, because they're going through so many quality procedures along the way and testing requirements that your product will have the highest quality. So again, my suggestion, if you are a seller who has it doesn't matter where you sell, to be honest, if it's Amazon, if it's your own store, if it's in retail, if you have a product that is extremely cheap, the sales price is extremely cheap, and your quantities are yet not that high, I would not recommend Japan directly for you. Japan is when you have very large quantities for like very cheap products, or when you have smaller quantities, but for the products that can be a little bit more expensive to sell. So I would go for the range. If you're selling your products, maybe $40, 40 US dollars plus, right? So if you're selling in that range, I would say Japan is for you. If you're selling in millions of pieces of the, I don't know, a simple plastic hook, then Japan is for you as well. Japan is, of course, very known for labor conditions and ethical regulations. You might not necessarily notice this because from time to time we see certain news coming out of Japan where people unfortunately pass away from a heart attack because they work too much, people sleeping at work, but these are usually office workers. When it comes to specifically factories, right? The regulations are a little bit different and people are a little bit different. They come and go. They might stay a little bit longer, but they're a lot more balanced in their work and home environments. So plus you have the ethical manufacturing, which you can use as your additional unique selling point, right? Because it's not harmful production. They make sure to take care of their workers. They make sure that everybody's wearing a protective mask, that there is no child labor, etc., etc. In today's day and age, this matters, not only for you as a human being, but for marketing as well. Let's be open and honest. So the Japanese, they don't like to cut corners, right? Because it's simply in their DNA. They will be direct, they will be nice, they will be direct, but they will not cut corners to speed up certain processes. They will make sure the quality is delivered and the standards are upheld. And this is sometimes a problem because it might take longer than you've expected, for example, for delivery of the certain products. So you need to make sure you balance this quality and this being extremely detail oriented, let's put it this way, versus your delivery times. I know of a few brands in Japan who are producing knives, right? So if you would like to have knives at home, very good quality. Not some of them are not so expensive actually, but extremely good quality. But some of those knives, they take 60 days to produce one knife. And the reason for this is because the knife goes through about 20 plus, I think 22 different processes throughout those days, because the quality that comes out at the end is insane. So this is something you definitely need to take into consideration, even though it's mass market, but it's kind of a different mass market with higher quality. So you need to understand, if you are selling in Japan, the products will be extremely different from what you can potentially sell in the United States. So a lot of people, they go and research local Amazon. Gary, how often do you buy from Amazon Japan? Or have you ever bought from Amazon Japan?
Oh, are you kidding me? Every day, the Amazon guy comes every single day, whether it's like toys for my kid or like like drinks, like even to my office, like, yeah, it's inevitable every single day.
And
Amazon is everywhere in
how
Japan. They're the
different,
number one e-com platform, and yeah, like same day
even bigger
delivered,
than
staple.
Rakuten. Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
beat
But
out the incumbent Rakuten. Yeah.
so how different do you see the products that you have? I mean, of course, you have like products of that are in US on the Japanese market. But if I were a foreigner who've never used Amazon Japan, how different would the product lineups see for me? How different would they be from the ones in US?
That really depends. I mean, I think if we're talking like, commodities like iPhone cases, then it's the same. But if we're
Of
talking
course.
about like this thing, I just grabbed this off my desk. This is like does anybody know what this is? This is like a letter opener in Japan, and it's crafted a
Jesus.
little differently from like your traditional US one. This one's made of plastic. I think that this was made in Japan. So it's very, I mean, certain products are very different. There's also like, very niche type products that you see in Japan that you wouldn't see elsewhere. Like for example, like home organization, like I don't want to dive too far deep, but like you have to like tear down all of your Amazon boxes. You have to tear down all of them. You can't just throw them away in the trash. You have to like organize them. You have to like tie them up. There are like products that go hand in hand with that as well. But you would never see that in the US. Like, I mean, I'm from the US. I've never seen anything like that. But in Japan, that's a thing because everyone has to like dispose of their trash a certain way.
Exactly. And that is the point. You have so many things. So you can actually use Amazon Japan if you're selling in US, if you're selling in Australia, doesn't matter, right? You can use Amazon Japan as your basic kind of research playground. But the point being is whatever works in Japan does not necessarily work in other countries. And this is where we see adaptation that will suit the local market. I always give an example of an electric kettle, right? Electric kettle in US. I come from Russia. I used to live in China for 9 years, then Singapore. Now I'm in Germany. Like electric kettle is the basic thing for me. But when you go to a US household, it is not necessarily a basic thing because a lot of people still use a stove, right? So we need to look at this for sure. So Japan, again, unique products for other markets. Those products that you're mentioning, I'm not certain about the letter opener, but it feels like it has like a gothic feel about it. So it probably has its market in US and other countries as well. One of the things that people tend to not understand is when they see a country as developed as, let's say, Japan or Germany or US, right? We count those as developed countries versus developing countries, right? China, for some reason, is still, I think, in the niche of developing countries, which is unbelievable. But the point with those countries, people think, oh my God, developed countries, the labor costs are so high. How can I afford? I can't manufacture there. You can, because of the high level of the utilization of the machinery that people are actually using at the factories, right? You still have human labor, people coming and working with their hands and doing certain things. And that is expensive, right? FTEs, full-time employees, are always expensive. But when you have machinery, right, economies of scale start working and your costs are starting to go down. And as much as there is human labor in Japan, right? And the level of machinery utilization is very high. And this is one of the things that you need to ask your potential manufacturers in Japan is like, okay, here is a process of producing, let's go with, here, I have a lemongrass balm. This is from Thailand, but cosmetics. So this is something that you would like to sell. One of the first things that I would ask the manufacturer is, okay, can you tell me about the processes that you have at your factory that involve to act like, in actually manufacturing this product? So basically, this is also looking at your BOM, at your bill of materials, right? which shows you not only all of the materials involved in there, but all of the processes. You can request this, all of the processes involved in actually manufacturing this particular product, because then you will have an understanding where you can decrease the costs, right? And if the prices are kind of fair. So let's source from Japan. You can't ignore the culture, right? Cultural differences between people were. I was talking to somebody recently because, again, I lived in China for 9 years. And I come from right from the border with China, actually from Russia. So Asia is kind of my second home. And people were asking me about the largest cultural differences between the Japanese and the Chinese even. And I told them about numerous differences that I thought popped to me like in my head. Japanese business culture is very different. It is more similar to the Chinese culture than it is to, let's say, people coming from Europe or US or Australia. So you need to get a little bit more understanding of how to communicate with Japanese suppliers, especially if those suppliers are a little bit on a smaller scale. If you're going somewhere in a smaller village, deeper, where they've never seen a foreigner before, and that can happen in Japan, and they barely speak English, and you're coming with a translator, you still need to understand how to behave yourself. It's like, because I'm Russian and I'm living in Germany, it is still my responsibility to know all the rules and regulations of the country that I'm living in. If I'm going to break the law, that's on me. It's not, I can't say, oh, I'm not local or something like this. The same goes for communicating with your manufacturer. You need to do a little research, watch a few YouTube videos in regards to the actual business culture in Japan and how to deal with the potential manufacturers, right? Because there's certain Japanese etiquette, communication styles, and in general, different business practices. So, Gary, how often do you go to karaoke to sing and drink with your business partners in Japan?
Um, I have a young child, so I don't go as often anymore. But when we do our conference, that's when we go. But yeah, that is, I mean, the drinking culture that's quite prevalent in Japan. I'll put it that way.
Exactly. So a lot of, and this is this one of the small differences, right? So one of the things, a lot of business in Japan will be done a little bit over drinking and maybe singing karaoke with your potential partners, right? Different types of dinners. So there is a lot of social aspect. It's not just let's get into a meeting room and kind of be done with this. So a big thing is also, failure to build that relationship because you don't understand the culture and you are rushing too fast into negotiations. We are so busy with everything in today's day and age. We literally don't have the time. I have like 5 million things on my calendar. I'm like, well, okay, all right. And some of the things I'm rushing through because I don't have the time. With the Japanese, that's not necessarily going to work out. With the Japanese in particular, you need to be a little bit more settled and you need to allow a little bit more time for them to get to know you. This is building a relationship, a long-term relationships. Japanese, they don't want a one-night stand. They want a marriage. Let's put it this way. We talked about the quality already, but the point being is if the quality if the country in general is known for great quality, it doesn't mean that the manufacturer you are working with is consistently going to deliver that quality to you. So you still need to make sure that you're doing proper quality control and you understand what procedures are in place within the factory as well. So lack of flexibility, this is where the problem with people might come in a little bit. So we work with a lot of people who only, for example, manufacture their products in China before. And they come to us and they say, oh, okay, we want to transfer our products to Japan, for example. First they started complaining, oh, why there are so much fewer factories than there are in China? Why are they responding so much slower? Why are they not willing to negotiate? Because guys, this is part of their business culture. They're different, right? If somebody does something for you in one way, it doesn't mean the other country has to be exactly the same. So this is the one big difference. Everybody needs to understand, not only about Japan, but any other country that you're sourcing outside of China. Everything is completely different. Completely different. Your money is different, right? The Japanese, they would rather not work with you than have you as a troubled customer. You can sometimes see this with the Chinese as well. So Japanese, they might not always be as flexible and willing to adapt in comparison to other countries because their processes have been set up in a certain way for a certain period of time. So adaptation is a little bit harder. Doesn't mean that they will not, but hence trying to, get to know each other, to figure out your long-term plans, and then jump into things together and try to adapt together. So it's a longer process, right, in comparison to China. So that's just a warning.
Can I share an
Logistics.
example of something, Yulia,
Yes.
that's I like what you had on this slide, like the lack of flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
I'll share an example. When we were searching for our apartment in Tokyo, because obviously I'm a foreigner, we're not Japanese, right? If you ever try to rent an apartment in Japan as a foreigner, you'll have the toughest time because most of the landlords, they don't want to deal with renting to a foreigner because of the language barrier, because of the cultural differences, because like even going back to like the trash example, I mean, in Japan, you literally have to like separate your trash into like 5 different categories. And if you mess that up, then it causes like the property manager a big headache. So that's the lack of flexibility that Yulia is talking about. Like literally, we had to find an agent that could speak English and Japanese to help us facilitate to find the right property owners to rent an apartment, which we did eventually. But yeah, just be aware of that, the lack of flexibility, because compared to China, because obviously I've lived in China for 11 years as well in Shanghai. I mean, China is more like easygoing and people just want to get the deal done. But in Japan, it's literally you got to follow the process like to a T. So yeah, so great point. Yeah.
We had a similar situation actually with manufacturers in Japan. We had the customer who was producing a skincare product, and they wanted to change one of the ingredients in the product, which we have confirmed with different laboratories that it's not a problem, etc., etc. But the factory was saying no. On principle, this is one of the top ingredients in our skincare for many years, and they're like, no, we're not willing to change this. So with the China is here is take my kidney and give me the latest iPhone. In Japan, it's not always about money, it's about principles and it's about tradition. So this is something you need to understand. If you're trying to entice the Japanese manufacturers with, I'll pay more money and this and that, that's not always the right way of doing it. Again, hence building the relationships. So logistics, Japan, you would think, oh, like there are certain countries, of course, that Japan is closer to. Again, I grew up in the far east of Russia, so we had some Japanese goodies all the time, like food-wise, so I enjoyed that. But for other countries, it might be a little bit more bothersome to get their goods to whatever you're selling. So if you're selling in Europe, that's a little bit more complicated. If you're selling in US or Australia, that's a little bit easier. Regulatory compliance, Japan, very strict, standards for products if you want to import them, right? So if you want to sell in Japan, be very careful. At the same time, this bodes very well for all those of you who would like to manufacture in Japan and sell outside of Japan, because the high level of regulatory compliance means, and they really have really high standards, that it will be a lot easier for you to get it into each and every other country. So if you have a skincare that is manufactured in Japan and you would like to sell it in US, you are pretty much very well set, because the Japanese standards are so high that they're pretty much on the same level. Actually, they're better than the US standards. to be honest, even though US standards for skincare went up in December last year. So this is something very, very good for you. They will have a lot of certification that the Chinese or others might not yet have. So if you're buying in Japan and selling outside, compliance, most likely you're compliant. Still check, of course, but this is what we found. Underestimating costs, we already talked about this. Yes, the products of the price tag can be higher. Hence, my suggestion is to actually deal with the products that sell at a little bit over higher price point. Research in the market, we kind of touched on this as well. And fall into plan for seasonality. I mean, this is basics. You sell Christmas products around Christmas or before Christmas time, right? But planning for seasonality also means planning with the manufacturers for seasonality. You need to understand when the factories will potentially be closed, meaning not be available for actually manufacturing your products. If you guys are manufacturing currently in China, you know there is Chinese New Year. Recently, there were May holidays. We have holidays at the end of September, beginning of October. So you got to plan around those days off in order to make sure to deliver your products on time. The same goes for Japan, meaning dig into the culture deep, download, literally Google the calendar for national holidays in Japan. And when you start working with the manufacturer, please make sure to ask them, guys, can you please give me your plan for when you're going to be off, for when the factory is going to be closed? This potentially can save you a lot of time and, like, trouble. So sourcing from Japan is a little bit more complicated, and I'm being very kind here, than, for example, from China. I'm always taking China as an example because this is what we call the world factory, and this is where most of the sellers or people who dealing with any products, they actually purchase their products. In China, you have Alibaba, you have 1688, which in Chinese is Yaoliubaba, which is literally where Alibaba, Yaoliubaba came from, right? So it's their Chinese version. There are many other websites that you can use. For example, Global Sources, Made in China. You can go to Canton Fair. This is where I just came from a 10-day sourcing trip. Or you can just go and visit manufacturers in general, or find their websites. In Japan, it's a little bit different. As technologically and in general as advanced the country is, if you go, everything's online, everything's available, etc., etc. But at the same time, the presence of the manufacturers online is extremely low. Right? So they might have some websites, but most likely they're going to be in Japan. So a lot of them are not yet adapt towards working with the customers who are coming from abroad, right? Who don't speak Japanese. So finding them online is extremely complicated. If you are trying to search just with the search engines like Google, you gotta do it in the local language. So use Google Translate, use DeepL, and literally translate, I don't know, skincare or eyebrow skincare manufacturer Japan, right? Translate this and search it in Japanese. For Japanese, Google Translate is a little bit better than for Chinese. So if you use Google Translate for Chinese, it kind of sketchy on a lot of occasions. For Japanese, for some reason, it is better, even though you have a lot of characters in Japanese from China. Or you can find a person on, let's say, Upwork to help you out to do a basic search, right? A Japanese speaking person, pay $10, $20 and be happy with this. So the initial way of finding manufacturers is a lot more complicated, and I will show a few things down below later on. Big problem.
Can I share one quick tip? Translation. Yeah. ChatGPT translation for Japanese is even better than Google Translate in my experience.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very, just to let you know. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I only speak Chinese, So I can't veto for Japanese, but that's awesome to know. So
Yeah.
one of the problems in Japan is also cooperation, like third-party supplier, lower cooperation, right? Or actually, this is not a problem for you. This is a good thing, meaning the manufacturers, they really, let's say, again, you want to produce this item, right? This instance, and you have the bottle manufacturer, you have the plastic cap manufacturer, you have the roller manufacturer, and you have the actual liquid. The liquid is being produced by your manufacturer, but he needs to outsource all the other parts. And in Japan, they're really, and this is where their like rigidness comes in and their non-flexibility. They might have the same manufacturer for the last 30 years, and they will not be willing to change them because they know the quality is solid. So this is a good thing, but this is also a bad thing because when you're trying to bring new products onto the market, it's harder for them to kind of outsource it somewhere else because they need, and it takes a little bit longer because they need to put certain procedures in place. I've mentioned the language, right? Language barrier. 15 to 28% of the Japanese population, they speak English. However, very low amount actually speaks fluently, which is around 8%. Gary, I'm sure you have came across this. I came across this in Japan for sure. But for me, again, with the Chinese, I can read some characters, so it's a little bit easier. But for people who do not have the language abilities, again, please hire someone to help you out. So one important point, reservations about foreigners. It doesn't mean they are hating you or us or anything like this. It's just Japanese. For Japanese, Japan comes first. Japanese people come first. When a foreigner comes in, they're a little bit more cautious about them, and you need to be understanding of this, right? So again, this is why when you're trying to call them, send emails, they might not be responding at first, not because they don't want your business, it's potentially because they don't know how to deal with you. This is why I think one of the first things, it's extremely important to have someone who understands Japanese culture and speaks Japanese. So how to find manufacturers? You have sourcing platforms, all right? Even on Alibaba, by now you have some manufacturers who are from Japan. On Alibaba, you can filter by countries, and Japan is one of those countries. People are asking me, are there any other sourcing platforms like Alibaba in Japan? No. Unfortunately, there are not. There is a sourcing platform called superdelivery.com. They are somewhat like Alibaba, but they're a little bit different. So their major point is you buy directly on their platform. You're not dealing kind of with manufacturer, right? So they put their margin on top. But I think super delivery can be an extremely awesome starting point for any of you who are trying to see, oh, what products are there, right? So I will give you some categories, but if you want to kind of have a little bit more of a deep dive, what products are there in Japan? So I think superdelivery.com can be very good for this, for you to just browse, right? It can be handkerchiefs, it can be skincare, it can be many different things. So yes, for kind of introduction purposes, they're wonderful. One of the other things is trade shows, for sure. If you can attend trade shows in Japan in person, it will be an exhilarating experience for you, and you will be overwhelmed and you will be motivated, and you will find tons of products that you can potentially produce there. And at the same time, you can pre-arrange for some factory visits in certain regions, and just go around little regions and literally knock on doors and see what factories are producing. This is what we were doing when we started collecting and creating our database of Japanese manufacturers. If you can't attend trade shows in person, Google a trade show, find a jewelry trade show, Tokyo. Go on their webpage and see who the exhibitors are, right? You're not going to go to Japan, you're not going to eat delicious food, but at least you will have a list of potential manufacturers of whom you can contact. So this is a great way of doing it. Social media, anytime, Gary, when you had the summit in Okinawa, right? Were you posting something on social media about this?
Yes.
Yes, and you were posting hashtags and you were posting what we were doing, etc., etc. So to all of you guys, all of the manufacturers, they do the same thing when they're attending trade shows, when they're trying to promote themselves. So even using Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook for finding manufacturers on certain hashtags like manufacturer Japan, skincare manufacturer Japan, this works as well. Partnerships is, for example, using people like Gary or people who are on the ground in those countries, in our case in Japan, to make connections for you and see if they can help out, right? Kind of referrals as well. Being on the ground, actually going to Japan and scouting for manufacturers, as I've mentioned already before. Okay, some of the
Can I
things that
quickly add something?
Yeah.
I know we're okay. For the trade shows, I learned recently the biggest trade show in Japan is the Tokyo Gift Show. I don't know if Yulia, you or your team. Yeah. So it's going to happen in September 4th through the 6th in Tokyo. So it's not obviously as big as Canton Fair because Japan's not as big as China. But if you do want to see many Japanese suppliers in one place, that would be a great opportunity, Tokyo Gift Show. And then there's also an online database, JETRO. I think it stands for Japanese External Trade Organization. And then they have a list of trade fairs in Japan. So if you're into like baby products, you can target in on those particular ones. So just want to share that.
Yeah, I also have a list of all the trade shows in Japan. If any of you guys need it, because we like, we're looking at all of the up and coming countries. So we have a list of all the trade shows. I should have put it here, but okay. We don't have
If you
time
have something like that, then yeah, maybe we can share that in the resources afterwards. Like I know you have like a bonus, and if people are interested, because some people told me, hey, they're interested in coming to Japan in September for that Tokyo gift show. If you are interested, send me a note, and if we have enough people, maybe we can do something like an event or something around that. Just an
needs
idea.
To be like, that's the point. It's like, this is what we do for China, sourcing trip, right? In a sourcing trip, you actually go through the trade show. Like in China, we did 10 days. So we did Canton Fair phase 2, phase 3. We went to visit factory visits. We went to the port of Guangzhou. We went to Xi'an. We went to Alibaba offices, Amazon offices. So you do education throughout those things as well. All right. So made in Japan, some of the things you got a lot of technology gadgets. So it's even beyond consumer electronics. So for example, robotics and smart home systems. This is something that's mostly used by larger multinational corporations like ABB, Hitachi, Siemens. You got a lot of stuff that relates to anime and manga, right? If you're into this, and the world is exploding, it's like the 80s are back. Like everything is like anime and manga and all of this anywhere you go, honestly. So you can produce a lot of those things in Japan as well. A lot of traditional crafts, especially ceramics, for example, porcelain, right? Because a lot of times we're thinking about ceramics, we're thinking about China, maybe Vietnam, huge in Portugal, but a lot of people are not thinking about Japan in that particular sense. Textiles are very big in Japan, and metalwork. So if you have products that actually require, I don't know, different types of shells or something like this can all be done in Japan. So green tea and tea related, matcha related products for sure, very, very large. I brought crap load of matcha snacks from Japan back home, just because. Musical instruments. We actually have a customer for whom we're producing different types of musical instruments, and not only instruments, but products that help musical instruments to stay in shape, let's put it this way. So we produce this in Japan as well right now. Household goods, right, and organizational solutions. And I mean, if you're selling on Amazon, if you're selling on TikTok shop or anything like this, those organizers, everything, all the women and men are trying to organize everything from their sock drawer to a fridge to I don't know, a bicycle stand. So different organizational solutions are very, very big in Japan. And the materials, plastic, durable, household goods, for example. Again, every time I go to a country, and it doesn't matter how many times I've been there, I always go to the local stores to see what they have out there, to see what we can potentially manufacture and start selling. One of the things that I found in Japan are very certain types of toilet cleaners. Not very sexy, but it's like this tablet that you put and it kind of explodes into it's insane. I've never seen anything like
The
this
Japanese
before.
have the most advanced toilets in the world, as you know, Yulia.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, and you see them a lot in Chinese, in good Chinese hotels as well. But yes, the care for the toilet
Yeah.
is to the
Right.
level of the
But that's
extreme.
the
But
association we're talking about, the made in Japan quality, that like the upper level, the luxury, right? That's something that you can
yeah.
get from Japan that is hard to get from countries like China.
Yes, but even like this toilet tape toilet tablet that I bought in Japan, right? They were dirt cheap because I bought them in Daiso, not Dyson, but Daiso, which is a chain of Japanese supermarkets, and they're dirt cheap in there. And I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah,
this is amazing. And I looked at it. Where is it produced? It's produced in Japan, right? So yeah. You have a lot of outdoor and adventure gear that you can produce in Japan as well, different types of equipment for hiking, mountaineering. Actually, if you look at table tennis and if you look at golf, you have tons of manufacturers for this in Japan, right? So if you think about those guys and you try to adapt for some other products, that's possible. Pet supplies in terms of even grooming, a lot of grooming products, starting from kind of more physical goods to sprays, like something more liquid. Wellness, relaxation, this is skincare, beauty. I mean, my suitcase was, I spent about $250, and this is I'm so lazy for skincare or anything, but I spent $250 in Okinawa buying skincare, like all sorts of stuff, and I'm using it, and it's amazing. I'm like, oh, this is great, right? So
Yeah,
this
my
is
wife buys
and
all her like cosmetics, beauty, everything in Japan. Like previously, she used to get like the Korean stuff, but like the Japan quality is better. I mean, it's a female thing. I know nothing about it, but it seems like Yulia and my wife, you guys are on the same page with the beauty
or
products
any
in
other
Japan.
woman, trust me on that one. So and it's all made in Japan, right? And educational toys, learning, so electronics in general, right? You got smartphone, you got cameras, you got speakers. You can produce all of this in Japan as well. This is not only China or Taiwan. A little bit bigger are parts for automotive parts or automobiles, right? In general, we of course have Toyota, Honda, and all those guys. Fashion, apparel, streetwear. We actually have tons of customers. We have one customer. He is a Japanese designer who designs manga, but he also designs fashion apparel, and we're producing everything for him in Japan. And this is really cool. Food and beverages, right? This is great. This is how Rakuten. Those of you who don't know what Rakuten is like Amazon of Japan, who was started by a guy who used to work in a bank for like 20 something years. He quit working at the bank at the age of 45, and he started Rakuten, where he helped Japanese farmers to sell rice, right? So he gave them a platform on how to sell their agricultural goods better, and then they grew into a platform which is like Amazon. Home and kitchenware gadgets, extremely different from what you can see in US and in other countries, and they're all produced in Japan. And one last category that there's more, but one of the categories I like is actually stationery and office supplies. Very high quality notebooks, planners, pens, right? Again, this is something that I would sell at a little bit of a higher price point. And here are some pictures from Daiso. For those of you who don't know how to spell it, it's spelled Daiso. You can literally, this store you can find in many countries in Asia. And I love going to Daiso. Every time I'm in Singapore, which I will be next week, I'm going to go there as well. And I will see what other potential new products are there. But all of these products that you see, whether it is different types of organizers, chopsticks, whether it's glass, whether it's paper towels or coffee filters or rice spoons, all of this is made in Japan, right? All of this is made in Japan. Here are some more, right? All of anything for your home, for cleaning, all the chemicals, even for your garden, right? Like if you have a fish pond and you gotta have some certain things in there, all of this can be done in Japan. Things for your fridge, even the little thingies for your hanging your clothing, electronics, soils for your shoes, face masks, of course. Cockroaches, no, you will never have them because they will be killed in a premium way, right? Plastic products. So again, this is, I was walking there. I was almost missing my train. I have a lot more pictures, but this is kind of the basics that I wanted to put in there. I think we're out of time, right? And as usual, I didn't
we
go
just have
through.
a few minutes left. Yeah.
Yeah, and as usual, I still have like 5 million slides that I didn't go through, but I hope the basic information was kind of helpful.
Yeah.
If you guys have any more questions, Gary, I will share with you the list of trade shows that will be taking place in Japan a little bit
Great.
later, and you can
Okay.
share it with the people who signed up. If you guys have any questions about Japan or anything like this, can always contact, no problem. If you want to ask me something directly, Yulia Blinova, you can find me on LinkedIn and just get in touch with me there. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Yulia. Thank you. And we'll be
I
in
actually
touch.
want to do like a proper guide.
Yeah, you should do a proper
Sorry.
guide. Okay. Any questions, guys, before we wrap up? We have an excellent opportunity to learn more about sourcing from Japan. If not, I have some pre-submitted questions before we finish up. So I'll give you guys a moment on that. Just one second. Oh, one thing, Daiso. Daiso has a very active social media on Instagram. So if you want to learn more and see what they have, like the new stuff they have, just go on Instagram and just search for hashtag Daiso. You can see more stuff straight from Japan. All right. So we talked about product categories. We talked about some sites to source from Japan. In terms of, a lot of people had questions like difference between China and Japan, right? Like the price range specifically. You mentioned that it's better for products that you retail for $40 and above.
Look,
Like how does it, I mean, is there like some apples and apples comparison? Like if I source, I don't know, like this bottle from China, it costs X. If you source it from Japan, it costs Y, but like the quality will be better. Do you have any rule of thumb that we can learn more from, Yulia?
unfortunately, as much as everybody wants to have a rule of thumb, until you start talking to the manufacturers, nothing's going to happen. You need to understand, like what you see in Daiso, for example, all of those plastic containers, all of those organizers, they can be 50 cents, right? They can be exactly the same price as they are in China, but your quantity will be higher. So maybe when your MOQ in China will be 1,000 pieces, in Japan, this will be 2,000 pieces. So maybe that would be the good rule of thumb. It's not for everything. It also depends on your price. If you're buying a product for $10, right? In China, you can purchase 500 pieces, right? However, in Japan, it will be maybe 1,000 pieces. Unfortunately, you just need to look on case-to-case basis. In general, Japanese manufacturing is more expensive. This is the general rule of thumb. It will be more expensive in comparison to China, and you will have to have higher MOQs.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for that. Are you familiar with freight costs from Japan to US versus China to US? Like, do you know if sellers will see any cost savings on the freight costs?
There will not be any huge savings on freight costs. No.
Okay.
We ship from Japan to Canada. We ship from Japan to US. Savings are not going to be huge. No.
Okay.
You
But
have
the
in
tariffs,
general,
you eliminate the China, like the Trump tariffs
yeah, that's
from
a
Japan.
different story.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's an absolutely different story, right? So
Yeah.
shipping, same. But the tariffs, especially, we need to look at this right now because Trump already was it like about 2 months ago, he announced, and you can guys Google this. He announced that he wants to have a 10% tariff on each and every item that's coming from China. So minimum 10%. And some of the items will have up to 75% import tax.
That you mean
which
plus
is insane.
10%, because right now we're like 25, 35, etc. Right? So on top, he wants even more, right?
No. He wants 10% on absolutely every item, not on selected categories, but on every item. So it doesn't matter if it's a lipstick coming out of China, a glass, or everything will have 10. At least that's what he said, 10%.
Right.
And others will change, and yeah.
Okay.
So Japan is great for that, for sure.
Yeah. So definitely run the numbers, guys. I mean, depending on your product, even though the product costs will be more expensive from Japan because the quality is better, look at the bottom line, the landed cost, because if you take into consideration all the tariffs, the duties, and anything else on top, coming from China to Japan, that will be your final price, and you might be surprised. Okay. Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, guys. We had one question from Jason. Could you talk a little bit about the tax side of selling in Japan via Amazon Japan FBA for non-Japanese residents perspective? A little bit outside the scope today, but as a general rule, I'm not a tax advisor, but 10 million yen threshold for foreign companies. If less than that, then you're not privy to the consumption tax. After that, then you'll be liable for that. I think that's like 60,000 US, so you won't have to worry about that for some time. Okay. All right. Thank you so much again, guys. Some quick feedback. Armely said this session was one of the best webinar. Thank you, Armely. I hope this was helpful. Great feedback. And other than that, I appreciate Yulia for coming on at 3 a.m. in Germany. Please get some rest. And
I gotta take Sebastian to the train station. He's flying to London today for Danny Macmillan's seller session.
Okay, we'll let you go then. All right. So definitely follow up with Yulia if you have any questions. We'll have the replay for everyone. We'll also share the listing of the trade show, guys. All right. Good luck out there. Stay safe, and let's talk soon. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.